That was the scene on Thursday morning. The latest move by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. We're going to talk about it now with Congressman Adam Schiff, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining us again this morning. I want to get to the implications of that Cohen plea deal. But first, your response to Roger Stone there. You say he's denying any contact with the WikiLeaks, any contact with the Trump campaign over WikiLeaks. Did you find his answers credible?
No, I didn't, not at all. And in fact, the emails that you read to him, those exchanges with Corsi, which I think he provided to the press, the substance of those emails are inconsistent with his testimony before our committee. The mere existence of those emails are inconsistent with his testimony before our committee. But nonetheless, his testimony was delivered with the same conviction that he made his statements to you this morning. That testimony really needs to be provided to the special counsel for consideration of whether perjury charges are warranted. So, no, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in what you heard this morning.
So you're saying, based on what he told your committee, that setting aside the underlying question of whether or not he was a conduit between WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign, you believe he's vulnerable to charges of lying to Congress?
I do. And what's more, if the allegations in that criminal information, the draft information that Mr. Corsi, I guess, was considering pleading to, if the substance of those allegations, and Mr. Corsi has only denied trying to mislead the special counsel, he hasn't denied having those conversations with Roger Stone. If that substance is correct, it also looks like Mr. Stone was attempting to enlist Mr. Corsi's help in covering for false testimony. So I think the testimony alone is a reason for great exposure for Mr. Stone.
Of course, it was Michael Cohen who pled guilty this week to false statements to Congress that admission he lied about working on the Trump Tower in Moscow to protect President Trump. What does that tell you? What does that agreement and what you've learned about it tell you about Mueller's core areas of focus, collusion with Russia, possible obstruction of justice by President Trump?
Well, it tells me a couple things. It tells me that he wanted to lock in Michael Cohen. There was no reason for that plea, for that additional count. It's not going to materially affect his sentence, but it does have the benefit of making sure that nothing changes down the road, that there's no pardon that causes this witness to go south. I think the likelihood of that was very remote, but nonetheless, as a prosecutor, you don't like to take chances. It also tells me that he wanted to put all this on the record. He wanted this out in the public domain. And that raises a concern for me. Why does Bob Mueller feel it necessary to do that? Is it that he fears that Mr. Whitaker will shut him down or prevent him from telling the country what happened? So that's some of the, I think, the procedural significance. But the very broad significance here, George, is that there is now testimony, there is now a witness who confirms that in the same way Michael Flynn was compromised, that the president and his business are compromised. And that is the former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was compromised because he was saying things publicly that were not true about discussions with the Russians over sanctions. And now we have Michael Cohen saying that what the president was saying, what Michael Cohen was saying and others were saying about when this business deal ended was not true. And what's more, the Russians knew it wasn't true. That at the same time that Donald Trump was the presumptive nominee of the GOP, and arguing in favor of doing away with sanctions, he was working on a deal that would require doing away with sanctions for him to make money in Russia. That is a real problem. It means that the compromise is far broader than we thought.
You saw what the president had to say. He said, first of all, that he thinks Michael Cohen is lying. But then he had a backup argument as well, basically saying that there would be nothing wrong if I were pursuing this tower. Here's what he said on Thursday.
I was running my business while I was campaigning. There was a good chance that I wouldn't have won, in which case I would have gone back into the business. And why should I lose lots of opportunities?
As he also put in a tweet, this was very legal and very cool. Your response?
Well, whether it was legal or not remains to be seen. It certainly wasn't very cool. More than that, it was very compromising of our country. In order for this Trump Tower deal to go through, sanctions had to be lifted on a Russian state bank. At the same time, Donald Trump is out there pushing to lift sanctions on Russia and this bank. There is no way to describe that as cool or ethical or in the national interest. It means that the president, whether he won or lost, was hoping to make money from Russia, was seeking at the same time to enlist the support of the Kremlin to make that money. And what's more, when this came to light, the Kremlin intervened. Mr. Peskov, the spokesman for the Kremlin, intervened to help Donald Trump and his business in the cover-up. That is so deeply compromising. And we have to remember what the Mueller investigation began as the Comey investigation was a counterintelligence investigation. That is an investigation into whether Donald Trump and his organization were compromised. And now, via Michael Cohen, we find out that, yes, there was compromise, and that puts our country at risk.
Based on what we've learned from Cohen's plea deal so far, do you think others in Trump's orbit lied to Congress about this as well? For example, the president's son, Don Jr.?
We are going through the transcripts of their testimony, and all of these transcripts really need to be provided to Bob Mueller so he can make those decisions. Bob Mueller has the advantage of, I think, far more information than we do that would allow him to vet whether what these witnesses told our committee was true or not. It's a pretty high bar to prove perjury. You have to prove there was a knowing intent to deceive. You have to prove that was not some failure of recollection. Now, there are certain people I'm confident have met and exceeded that bar, but I will leave those determinations to Bob Mueller.
Bob Mueller has also determined that Paul Manafort lied to him as he was supposed to be cooperating with the special counsel. We learned also that he was sticking with the joint defense agreement, talking to President Trump's attorneys while ostensibly cooperating with prosecutors. What's the significance of that?
Well, it means that Paul Manafort was double dealing. Basically, he was going through the pretense of cooperating, but he was really, in an underhanded way, supplying information to the Trump legal defense team. And of course, the president continues to dangle a pardon for Paul Manafort, which only adds to the growing body of evidence that the president is engaged in obstructing justice. That, I think, is the ultimate significance here. But I think, as a practical matter, the special counsel is going to have to throw the book at Paul Manafort, as well as Mr. Corsi. You cannot have people who are essentially in discussions with you flaunt that process, deceive you, if you want to telegraph to other witnesses that you darn well better be true when you say you're going to cooperate with us.
Congressman Schiff, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.